live. Hello and welcome to another week of Acts of the Blood God. Cat is out for smokes once again. So it is me here, Eric Van Allen, hosting, joined by Nadia Oxford. Nadia, how are you doing this week?
Oh, I'm okay, but I'm worried Cat's gonna get lung cancer. I don't lecture people about what they put in their bodies, but holy damn.
Well, we didn't talk about it, but this is actually Kat's getting smoking chips. She's got a new smoker that she's putting some brisket in and stuff like that and smoking chips.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You do have to worry about nitrates, but that's probably not as bad as inhaling toilet bowl cleaner.
I do like that from the Twitch chat. We've got Rev Tobias says outplaying 40K, and maybe that's Cat's new thing. Is
That's
Cat
like
is playing 40K,
not denying or verifying.
getting some figs. Uh,
That's worse than smoking, in my opinion.
What if you
joining
smoke the
us,
figures?
that lovely voice joining us is Lucas White. Lucas, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Happy to be here again.
Good to
Oh,
have
we are
you.
happy to have you. Absolutely. Folks, this week we are talking about Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes, the much awaited Suikoden successor from the team Rabbit and Bear Studio and 505 Studios. Before we get to that, we are Axe of the Blood God. We're here. We're an RPG podcast that airs every week. You can catch us on the podcatcher of your choice or on Twitch at twitch.tv/bloodgodpod, where we are now recording somewhat regularly. I say that because we're airing this live on Sunday at 9 a.m. Pacific time. That is not our usual time. Usually, even like down below in our bug right now, it says streaming every Saturday at 9 a.m. Pacific. That's a lie today.
Whoop.
Look, sometimes we got to move it to accommodate weird Sunday morning embargoes. But
Sometimes you gotta tell porky pies for the sake of embargoes.
exactly. So normally Saturday at 9 a.m. Pacific, we do stream here. We are also, and please drag me for this chat and the Stars of Destiny here. We are still live streaming a Chrono Trigger playthrough that I'm doing. First time playing Chrono Trigger. I'm getting back to it. I promise it's gonna happen soon. Just life, it happens. Things come up, but we will get back to it. I am going to finish Chrono Trigger. Teeps is saying it is never going to end. Um, anyways, we have a ton of stuff going on there. You can head over there, check that out. You can also go to our Patreon. We are on Patreon, patreon.com/bloodgodpod, where you can back us at various different levels. And we have old Pantheon episodes that are now up and available a la carte if you just want to particularly grab out a single Pantheon episode to listen to. We've got a lot of great ones in the back catalog. If you're looking for one, I recommend Lunar. Lunar was a fun one. We had a good
Lunar was a
time on
good
that.
one.
Ooh.
Castlevania
Yeah.
Symphony of the Night, also a pretty good one from what I remember. Legend of Zelda:
Yeah, it
Link to
was
the
fun.
Past was a pretty
Yeah.
fun one. I mean, we've got a lot of great ones in the whole now. Our Soccer Awards is a great one if you want to hear our producer Victor get his heart broken in real time.
Yeah.
Oh
You get
no.
pinpoint the moment his heart shatters.
Uh-huh. We've got so many up there, so please go check that out if you can. Uh, that is patreon.com/bloodgodpod, or head to shop.bloodgodpod.com for all our merch and stuff like that. We are talking about maybe doing some more merch, maybe around the charity live stream, which we are confirming it live here. We are doing the charity live stream for Trans Lifeline again this year. We're aiming for July is our current goalpost, because June we like to do it. We would like to do it during June. Makes sense during June. June is also like the busiest month in video games, so we have to like
Yeah.
consider that. And so we'll do a little fashionably late July stream, and that's probably what we're aiming for. But another 24 hours across 2 days live stream full of all the fun faces you like to see, all the goofy activities we get up to. We'll probably do some sort of Blood God Olympics. We'll do various other things, some Jackbox. I kind of want to play some Mario Kart, you know? Have y'all played the Mario
See
Kart
some
DLC
good
tracks
old
yet?
fashioned vanilla Mario
Mm.
Kart. You really can't go wrong with that. Although nothing's gonna beat Lord of the Koroks. That was
Oh, I have a
that was
new
me losing my
idea.
mind.
I have another idea for Lord of the Koroks, like a follow up to Lord of the Koroks that we might do this year. It's a lot of planning, it's a lot of production, but if we can make it happen, it's going to be incredible. So
The
hopefully it
Korok
works.
Hobbit. The Korra Hobbit.
The prequel to Lord of the Koroks, finally, the three-parter from Peter Jackson.
Oh
Uh,
God.
Anyways, all of that is coming up. Please stay tuned. But for now, let's get into the main segment of the show. Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes. The reviews are out on a Sunday morning, no less. People are
What
talking
an
about it.
unusual embargo. I don't know if I've ever done a Sunday, but have you guys, can you remember a Sunday embargo at all?
Oh
I
yeah,
think this is my first one.
I think I've had at least one
Oh.
other Sunday embargo. I don't remember what it was, but I do feel like I've had a moment like this.
Mm.
Uh,
I feel like if it's not my first one, it's the first one I've not been able to just publish myself without edits. So this was the first one that was like I noticed and was stressed out about it. So.
mm-hmm. It's weird, like to give a little peek behind the curtain before we talk about Aiden. We you get time with it, but then you do have a moment where you have to kind of like schedule it and be ready for it to go, and then you brace yourself for the discourse that comes after everyone's takes are out, and you're kind of seeing where everyone landed on it, and all of that happening on a Sunday morning just feels strange.
It
It
does.
feels
Yeah.
odd.
Yeah.
No bueno.
Mm.
Saying like, "Oh God, please don't let me be the lowest one. I will get my balls bitten off on Twitter."
I pulled in
In this
some.
case, I'm worried about being higher than everyone else, but we'll get to that, I think.
We'll talk about that in a moment. I pulled in some takes from other people before we talk about us. Josh Broadwell, writing for Game Informer, says Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes is a good reminder of why the RPG genre left some parts of its golden age behind. It's also a testimony to what makes the genre special and the power of good storytelling to move and inspire. Our friend Jenny Lada over at Silicon Era says, my entire Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes Switch experience is tarnished due to the frustrating issues I faced getting it to run on the OLED model, loading and texture problems, persistent lag, and the occasional crash. And we will be talking about that in a moment.
That's disappointing. Yeah.
Uh, and hey, Lucas White of Shack
Oh my,
News here.
that gracious me.
Oh,
Comes in
no.
here and says, maybe 100 Heroes doesn't have me ready to run outside screaming about miracles, but I'm plenty satisfied and ready to go back in and fill in some old classic JRPG blind spots. Well, after I replay Tear Chris. Tear Chris? Tear Chris?
Tear cries.
Tears of the Cries?
Yeah, they did that on purpose.
Mm-hmm. So, we have all also played it to some very degree. Obviously, Lucas reviewed it. I have played probably about 15 hours is what I would ballpark it at. So I'm at the point now where I've been doing. They've introduced castle stuff, and I'm getting like deeper into it. I'm also just recruiting a bunch of people. I've had my first. I don't know if would you consider. I don't know if that's a spoiler, so we're not going to talk about it. But I've basically had a shift, is what I will say. I've played a different thing, and also I've done a lot of what I would say are like the main Suikoden things in this, which is like doing the actual normal RPG battles, and then the castle management, and then the big strategy battles, which are like the
Hmm.
three pillars of Suikoden, as far as I understand.
Yeah,
Nadia, how
pretty
much
much.
have you played at this point?
Not as much as you guys because I've had like other games going on for jobs and whatnot, but I have played the first mission and just kind of goofed around a bit. So I certainly have like impressions of the early game that I can build off on.
It's it's a curious and interesting thing, I think. To go over like some top level really quick. It's a successor to the Suikoden series by Rabbit and Bear Studios, a studio that was largely founded to recreate Suikoden, essentially, to reignite the flames of Suikoden because it wasn't going to happen any other way. And so they went to Kickstarter in 2020, got hugely backed, huge amounts of money went
Hmm.
into this. And we'll talk about Kickstarter too, because I have particular notes about Kickstarter and video games. But in 2022, there was a prologue game, Aiden Chronicle Rising, that came out. It was developed by Natsume Atari in cooperation and collaboration with Rabbit and Bear. But like my understanding is that Natsume Atari did a lot of uh, the lifting on that. Rabbit and Bear was kind of consulting to make sure everything clicked together.
Yeah.
We like that broadly. We enjoyed that
Yeah,
on this.
I really like that game.
Real nice pocket-sized action RPG. Really good on Steam Deck. I found it to be a really like compelling Steam Deck game for some reason. Just fit that really well. We also have to note Suikoden creator and former head of Rabbit and Bear Studio, Murayama, passed away earlier this year. Kind of put a note on all this. There was a lot of talk going into the launch of this that this was going to be like a big thing about Murayama's legacy, and that there was a lot of
Mhm.
sadness that he wasn't going to get to see the reception from fans. So um, it's kind of a dark note to put on all this, but
Yeah, for sure.
it like an indelible mark left by somebody on this industry that definitely left a note. So for Aiden Chronicles, what what works for us? I'm gonna pass this to Lucas first. What are kind of like the things that you've enjoyed and you've liked about Aiden Chronicles so far?
I think I don't want to say production values necessarily, but I think it's presented really well.
Mm.
I think like visually, it looks really good. It kind of hits the older Suikoden games, at least the first two. They kind of like a distinct look to them.
Hmm.
Because like the especially like the sprites were always really colorful and they were kind of like tall and lanky, and that's kind of what I
Yeah,
remember the most. Because I haven't really played the first two a lot, but I touched them, and that was one
they
thing.
touched your heart, and then you touched them back.
Exactly. Like the lighting's really good. I think like the 3D environments, they could have looked very generic, but they don't. And I think the lighting's a good part of that. I think the enemies look really nice. And I think the way it kind of plays around with like fake handy cam in like really dramatic moments is really effective.
Mm.
Hmm.
Um, and like the animations in combat, I just think like overall like the vibe is really nice.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
team up
yeah.
attacks are really something that impressed me early on, and you don't get a
Mhm.
ton at the beginning, and maybe that's like maybe I'm getting ahead of myself into the things I don't like, but uh, it's a really slow start to this game. Like it takes
Mhm.
a
Mhm.
long time for this game to even feel like you're going and you're moving, and I think a lot of the intro of Aiden Chronicle is kind of messy because there are times where they just you do a mission. So you're playing as Noah, this kid who has left his hometown to join the Altus Vice Watch and kind of see the world, right? And eventually you
Hmm.
get caught up in the grander politics of what's happening, and that's how you end up in the place where you are leading an army and raising a castle and doing all the big grand stuff that Suikoden is kind of known for. But you have to have that moment where you take the character and get them to the point of that. And I think the getting there is very difficult and maybe doesn't feel as smooth as I remember it from Suikoden 2, where
Hmm.
I it's really hard for me to not compare the protagonist of Suikoden 2 to Noah because I feel like even color palette wise they are
Kind of
very
look the
similar.
same. No,
Yeah,
Yeah, they're the
you're
same person.
I
you're
feel like it's
valid.
very intentional that they did that, and if not, I really like got to ask them some other questions. But uh, I had that moment where I was sitting there and I was playing a mission as Noah, and there was just I finished the mission, I turned it in at the watch, and then just like faded to black, and then faded out with Noah walking out of his in room or whatever, and Lena, the girl, the punch girl that's always
The
like
Nanaki stand-in,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
not Nanaki. What's her face from Suikoden 2, the sister, Nanami.
That is Nanaki, isn't it? I don't know. I
Nanami.
haven't
Yeah, Nanaki
Nanami
is Red
Nanami.
13.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. So she she's kind of like, oh my gosh, Noah, what a crazy 2 weeks it's been, or
Yeah,
wow, it's been like months, and I'm like,
it was an
oh
adventure.
good. Yeah, there are multiple times where it does that, and I think it does it very in a
Messily.
very unwieldy. Yeah, it's a very
Yeah,
messy way
yeah.
that they handle it. It's like they just kind of fade to black and then come back. They're like, wow, what a crazy week that was. And that's like a very like minor nitpick, but it kind of highlights that a lot of that intro has to cover a lot of ground
Yeah.
and doesn't do so in the most compelling and effective manner. And it just kind of feels like they're hurriedly getting through some stuff that they got to get through, because I think once they get to the point where okay, now nations are involved. We're talking about politics. We're getting like characters moving around and stuff like that. I was starting to see the idea and the drive a little bit more. And I was, we're not spending so much time going, let's do a mission. Okay, cut to a few months later or a few weeks later, and let's do another thing. And it felt very disconnected, disjointed in those moments. So I like that a lot. Once we actually got to this story, but the early
Mhm.
intro feels kind of rough. But I do like, as I was saying before, the team up attacks when you start out. you don't get a ton of them, but as you start to get more characters and get more of those team up attacks, the hero combos as they're called in this game, they are really, really visually impressive. I don't know if you've messed around with those too much, Nadia.
Oh yeah, what I can, and what I like about those is that they're a lot more obvious on how to use them than they were in Suikoden 2, which is a little bit more of a guessing game. Like you just kind of assume certain characters have bonds with each other, like Ennison and Shiro are two characters that are always in my party, the Archer and the Wolf. They just have a fantastic team attack. But anyway,
Mhm.
I know we're going to talk about Kickstarter soon enough and its effect on games, but I'll say in general, from what I've played, like this has the seed of Suikoden. That's really, I'm sorry, let me try to think of a better metaphor. This has like the spirit of Suikoden in its core, and
Yeah.
it's it has its flaws that are kind of the result of being funded by Kickstarter. I think you have those RPGs like Sea of Stars, like you play that game and you don't even realize this thing's been Kickstarted because the production value is so consistent, so well
Mhm.
done. Whereas with this game, you can see, well, they put a shit ton of work in the characters and animations, which is good. That's where all the work has to go. That's where it should go. But since we've kind of like, we're funding ourselves, we're independent here, and something's got to give in terms of what gets paid for. I find the dungeons kind of lacking in terms of set
Mm.
pieces. Like it's based on an old RPG, of course, and I'm fine with that. But like something like, say, the forest that you're in the first part of the game, they can have a lot more life to it. You can have like animals or something in the background. I don't think there's any reason, unless you bravely default and really have a system based around it, to have random encounters the way they have them in this game. I know they're in Suikoden 2, but there's nothing really clever or well balanced about how the encounters are are like kind of spaced out. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
The
Bravely
frust
Default is based. Sorry, is Octopath Traveler? Does it have random
Yes, it
encounters
does.
too?
Octopath has random encounters. Yeah.
Yeah, and you just feel like the game is based around that. The game is built around that. Whereas in this case, just like, oh well, here's random encounters because, to be honest with you, we didn't really have time to draw and program overworld sprites. It feels a bit like that.
I think my thing with random encounters in this game is less that and more so that I think this is the first RPG where I've ever said that there's too much time between random encounters, and
It is scarce, yeah.
Mm.
I only noticed it because there are multiple quests, or at least I know of. I've done one, and I know of at least one other that require you to go kill a certain kind of monster that shows up in a
Yeah,
dungeon, and running around trying to get that monster to show up, because even when you get a random encounter, it's not a guaranteed encounter that you're going to run into the monster that you need to fight. I really noticed how long it was to get a random encounter to just proc and happen. And I don't know if that was maybe an area thing or what, but I have noticed as I've played that there are surprisingly few random encounters that I'm running into. Like I could run across the overworld and maybe hit one random encounter the entire time, which normally
yeah,
other people would be like, "Oh, that's great." But there are times when I'm like, I kind of have like a character in my party. Like I just recruited the magical girl and she's like really low level. And so I could kind of use like a few encounters that like aren't going to give any XP to most of my party, but like she's really low level. She could use the
yeah.
XP. So I could like fight this fight real quick, knock out these monsters, get her some XP and get her caught up. Now I'm kind of like lagging behind in that regard, and it's kind of strange to run into that issue because I can't remember the last time I ever said that about an RPG. Like I'm having too few random
Yeah.
encounters.
You should definitely be able to adjust that. If you're gonna have random encounters, I understand, but give us like mastery over the timing for sure.
Lance Hart in Twitch, I've not verified this, but Lance Hart in Twitch chat says on PC your screen refresh rate affects encounter rate. It's weird.
That's very
Um,
strange. It
Oh,
is a very
weird.
sudden, like, like a very sudden draw into the battle. It is a bit of a jump scare.
I'd be interested to investigate that. I think
Yeah.
so I do want to talk about Kickstarter stuff because I have a very different take on Kickstarter things, but one thing I do think is really important to talk about is like platform differences in this game.
Yes. Yeah,
So,
for sure.
for
Mhm.
context, when I first started playing this for coverage, I was playing it on Switch. And after about an hour or two of playing it on Switch, I sought out a Steam code
Yes,
because
I've heard the
it
rumors.
it
Oh, man.
was bad. I think it has gotten better. I tested it yesterday morning as I was starting to write my impressions piece. to see if it had gotten better with patches that happened between when code went out
There
and
were big
launch day.
patches, yeah.
Some of my main problems have been addressed. Other of my main problems have not been addressed. My understanding is that the game progression stuff, the stuff that literally like stops your playthrough, has been addressed. One major thing with the Switch that is like honestly a deal breaker for me, and what caused me to go, I cannot play it on this platform, is I would hit the button to open the menu where your like inventory and your party planning and all that is, and it would literally be like 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi,
Oh, that's
3
terrible.
Oh
No,
Mississippi,
I couldn't deal
open.
with that.
Yeah, and it freezes the game when you do it too. So like the whole thing, you can just see like the whole game comes to a stop, and it's like we gotta open the menu. and
What do we do?
and in an RPG where you are kind of messing with those things
Yes.
and doing stuff with your party, and like frankly in this game using your inventory a lot just to heal characters, I feel like I'm using my items fairly frequently to not use
Same.
MP and things like that. uh that's a really big issue. That's a really notable issue. And I know there was some trepidation around whether there was going to be a Switch version and if they were going to back the Switch version or not, because I think at some point
yeah.
they were saying something about like, oh, we're planning for the Nintendo console that's available when this comes out. So
Yeah.
part of me does wonder if there was like real hopes at Rabbit and Bear that like Switch 2 would be out by now.
Yeah.
Please, no.
Because it
It's
has
a
that vibe.
deceptively beefy game.
I was gonna ask, what takes up all the power? Do you guys know?
Oh,
I mean,
like
I
what
was
eats
kind
it
of
up
talking
even
about
more.
like the lighting and stuff earlier. I think
Right.
just like you look at a game like this and you're like, oh, it's got sprites. That means it's gonna run on anything. But it just
That's
seems
what I
like,
thought.
you know, I want to avoid saying things like optimization because that can mean so many different things. But like, this is a game that I initially was like, oh, I'm gonna play this on Steam Deck. And that was not a good idea because it just like it just can't keep up. It
That was
runs.
surprising to hear for me. I thought Steam Deck for sure would be all right.
Yeah, exactly. I've got a ROG Ally that I got through work at one point. It runs great on that. It runs
Mm.
great on my normal computer, but like
It runs
anything
great
that,
on my PC. Yeah.
yeah, it's just like anything under that certain threshold, it's just gonna struggle.
How about the PS5 version? Do you guys know?
I've not played it
Yeah.
myself, but I've seen
I
some
heard like
reports.
it's problematic, but I never got verification.
Yeah, it seems like one of the biggest issues, aside from like the obvious like glitches and stuff, is it's just like it can't keep up in terms of like resolution on anything but PC. Which I feel like I haven't seen any of this stuff firsthand, but I've been talking to people and stuff. And there's a point later on in a dungeon where you kind of have to. I mean, maybe you don't have to, but basically you kind of have to look down a hallway
Right.
to see what the dungeon looks like for a very specific reason. And on PC, it's fine because you can see down the whole hallway. And even then, I was kind of like, okay, I think this is what I'm supposed to be doing. But on any other platform, it's going to be kind of blurry. So I just can't
Right.
imagine it like even on PS5. Apparently, it's still kind of like fuzzy in a lot of ways.
That's too bad.
And yeah,
I
Because I do want to play it on PS5. I have the PC code, but I want to rebuy it like and play it on my couch.
yeah,
I do think there are a lot of features in this game, a lot of like graphical features that I kind of look at and I go, okay, I get why this looks neat. I get why this looks cool. But I think if you're having these issues where you cannot like function on certain platforms, maybe we need to start finding ways to swap
Yeah.
that stuff or toggle it or do something, because it really feels like the sentiment coming out is that Eiyuden is only worth talking about on the PC because on other platforms it's just a subpar to like borderline, depending on your personal preferences, like not playable experience. Like I
That's
would,
really
if
disappointing.
if I was
Mm.
if I was playing it on the Switch, I would have dropped it by now, straight up. I would not want to play that experience any further. And the PC version is what got me over the hump and further into the game. But I really, really just am surprised that it launched. And this is tying back to the Kickstarter thing.
Hmm.
They have like backer commitments that they have to honor, right? They have to
Mhm.
deliver certain things. But I want to loop in another, like, it's going to sound weird to call this a major critique, but it is constantly popping up over and over again is when you do a Kickstarter. Obviously, there are some signs that a game is very Kickstartered. It has a lot of like backer stuff because number one, like there's feature creep in a way. Like you
Yeah,
notice there's just a lot
big
of
time.
things that feel like in there for reasons. But also not just feature creep, but like just creep. Like the best way I have to describe it is in the early towns, I noticed there are some villagers walking around and stuff like that, but there were like
Mhm.
tons of cats and like animals and stuff. I was like, there
It
are
sounds
so
awesome.
many animals in this game. And I realized when I walked up to them, I was like, oh, some of these, I think at least like one or two that I talked to had like names. And
Ah,
so I was like, oh, okay,
yeah.
it's probably like a Kickstarter thing. Um,
Backers. Yeah.
the one that I most noticed, I don't know what this is. There's like a portrait of someone next to Ymir in that early town.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? Where you're talking to
Yep. I
him
know
for a lot
exactly
of
what
the
you're
early
talking about.
quests, and there's just like a giant portrait of someone just there during these
They
like
look like a
story cutscenes.
normal, like
Just a
contemporary
It is
human
person.
weird.
being.
Yeah, just a real
There's
life person. And I'm
I
just like,
actually, yeah, I know
huh.
exactly what you mean. That's been a problem since the very earliest days of Kickstarter. They say, "Hey, we'll put you in the game," and next thing you know, some beardo is looking at you from some portrait. It's like, "Hey, what you doing?" But
It reminds me of Bloodstain. Bloodstain had the same thing
yeah,
where like they were just you could like back Bloodstain to like get your face on a portrait. So when the portraits came flying at you, it was like some random person. You're like, what is going on right
friend
now?
coming for my blood.
Yeah.
At
But I think the
least in that
thing
game, they were kind of like dressed up to fit the like
They were.
time
They did look
period a
very
yeah,
little
here
aristocratic.
it's someone where like in glasses and like a button
Yeah.
down shirt and stuff, and I'm like, this what is happening
The way
here?
you're
Like a
describing it, it sounds like the
somebody's
guy from
LinkedIn
Weekend at
portrait.
Bernie's coming
Yeah.
at you.
Uh, so the main thing I noticed with Kickstarter though is so we haven't talked about well we've really only talked about some basic stuff. Well, we should talk about the gameplay systems like in depth in a
Mhm.
second here, but we can maybe use this as a springboard to talk about one. The war mode or whatever you want to call it, the strategy
Hmm.
mode, where you're kind of moving these like tiles. You have like a big grid, and you have these like units that you're moving. And like Suikoden 2 had this. Obviously, this is like a part of the Suikoden series. Is like having these big grand strategy almost battles, and I kind of like how they feel. I like that units have to like charge forward and then about face and turn again, and you have these abilities and you're kind of like really trying to think moves ahead because you've only got like
Mhm.
one action you can take each turn, and like even slightly mispositioning or something like that is going to cause problems for you later down the line. I like that a lot. I think it's interesting. I think the
Mhm.
first one they show you is really cool too because they have I won't spoil like where it happens or how it happens because that's kind of a spoiler thing, but you have these like you're defending a town, and there are these like walls where you're running up these ramps to like hold them, and then the enemy is bringing in these like mobile ramps that like establish themselves so their army can run up to meet you, and it's like a really really cool visual, and I thought it looked really impressive. But I could only see part of it because on the right hand side there was a kill feed running of
Oh
just
my god.
people
Yeah.
dying in combat, but they were all at first I was like, it's kind of weird that they just randomly generate names in like a kill feed on the right hand side. That's weird. And I started seeing names that were like Lord Sluggo has fallen in
Yeah.
battle, and I was like, oh, this is Kickstarter,
There's
isn't it?
Not Lord Sluggo. Come
there's
back.
420 Sephiroth Lord
Yeah,
falling in battle.
yeah.
As Charbundle says, actually, the best thing I've ever seen is from Sea of Stars, where they kind of sequestered all that to a kind of a tomb area where you
Yeah.
could read the names. And some of those, like, I'm guessing the highest paid backers had, like, statues made out of custom sprites, which is, some of them were very sweet. Like, the one dedication from the parents to their dead daughter, it's like, oh, Jesus
Yeah.
Christ. But that's the first time I spent time and really wanted to, like, read what the contributors wrote. And is so much better than seeing like Vegeta Weed 420 getting killed by
Has fallen in glorious battle.
oh no, F in the chat.
Not Vegeta Weed. On 420, no less. 421, I guess. But
On this holiest of days.
yeah, it's I think it's really important to note how you do that stuff, and boy, do I notice
Yeah,
it
for sure.
all the time in Eiyuden Chronicle. So maybe not well handled, but Charbundle
Yeah.
notes, surprising that the strategy feels good. That was always the worst part about Suikoden. I don't think it necessarily feels like I'm not sitting here like, oh, it's like Final Fantasy Tactics. It's like it's super in depth.
Yeah,
I thought it
tactics.
was I thought it was neat. It was like an interesting of all the like side things you do in this game. It kind of looks goofy at times. There are some elements of this game that kind of look goofy at times because
Yeah.
there's just so many things that you're doing that I don't think a high level of polish was brought to the strategy, but it does enough. It does what it needs to do. So you have that moment of, oh, we're panning down and the units are fighting, and it's kind of like you've got that like feeling of like, oh, this is like really big and epic and grand. This is cool, and then it's just like
Yeah.
it does not overstay its welcome. It does precisely enough. Lucas, maybe you can speak to whether the later battles get any more involved or stuff like that.
It's never really like challenging. I think it does a good job almost like simulating tension, like you were saying with like
Mhm.
the having to choose your direction. Like that first one is interesting because like you were talking about the ramps. You can't make your guys like go through the wall,
Mm-hmm.
which like sounds obvious, but like the way the UI is kind of set up, it was like, oh, I can't move my guys really. That's interesting. But then like the ramps come in, it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then there's like a point where more enemies come in, and you kind of have to be like, you have to really think about like, what should I tell my guys here to do?
Mhm.
In a way that like you can see like, oh, this isn't really going to let me fail unless I go out of my way to. But it's like
Once they
it
run
makes
into
your
the fray.
brain kind of yeah. So I think it contributes to like the vibes. I think like when it wants to be dramatic, I
Yeah,
think that's
yeah.
really effective. Like there's another part where there's like one duels that I think also really like hit the like uh, the audience note really well, even if like they don't add a ton to like the gameplay or the challenge or whatever. But yeah,
Yeah, the
Those are like
one-on-one
the paper,
duels.
rock, scissor ones from like Suikoden 2, right?
Yeah, where you have to like
Yeah.
read their dialogue window and then choose like, am I going to attack or counter? And there's some fun bits where they're like, I've only done one of those so far, but I had a moment where I was like going to counter and the other enemy goes into counter and they're just kind of like dot 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 over their heads,
yeah,
and like
it's a little messy.
those are enjoyable. I think I like them for what they are, and they do a lot of fun like camera pan around. It reminded me of the end of Metal Gear Solid 4 almost, where like the
Yeah,
camera's just wheeling around. And it's like, look at these two guys fighting, and it's like
Yeah, very
super
dramatic.
cool. Yeah.
yeah,
So I think maybe the thing, and so again, to emphasize, my Suikoden experience is mostly just playing maybe about 8 hours, 10 hours of Suikoden 2, and that's about it. I think the thing that I found so far in my like 15 or so hours with Eiyuden is it's overall a pretty simple RPG. It's pretty straightforward. There's not really any mechanics that I find too difficult to grasp or like really even Octopath I think had some more involved mechanics with how you were using the boost and when you were braking and
Hmm.
things like that. Here it really feels like I am just doing damage and then I have various meters that can charge up or be depleted to do that damage, but I'm either doing damage or blocking, and then occasionally in some boss fights there are like gimmicks and those are kind of fun. I like
Yeah,
those.
those are neat.
But mostly I am just doing very basic RPG battling. Is that kind of the vibe? Is that like what we're going for here?
yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, because I think one of the biggest problems I had with this game is it's very stat checky.
Mm.
Hmm.
Um, all throughout the game, it feels like things are going pretty smoothly, but oh, I'm not strong enough, so this boss is just gonna like
I do find
smash
the
me.
bosses are a little bit overpowered sometimes if you don't know
Yeah,
exactly where you are in terms of your power.
Exactly. But then when you go back, you level up a few times, you go back, suddenly it's like a piece of cake.
Yeah,
And
like,
that
oh,
happens
hey,
over and over again. Yeah.
what a wimp.
There's a one fight in particular that was really frustrating because it was like, um, for context, there's like your front row and your back row. So of course it's like, oh, I'm going to put all my squishy magic people in the back row.
Hmm.
And then you go in this boss, and it's like, I have a laser that hits the whole back row, and that's all it does. It kills your whole back row if you're not strong enough. And it's like, cool. Thank you, video game. You've ruined my
Video
afternoon.
game for this video game moment.
Yeah.
And
And like the gimmicks can be fun. There's a really fun one where there's like construction equipment, and
yes, yeah.
the crane like picks the rock up, and the bad guy's like, oh, I'm gonna pull this lever and it's gonna smash you, and you're like, but what if I hit the lever after you?
Yeah,
and it's
I
really
know.
funny because it makes you look at the timeline, and it's like, okay, I shouldn't hit this thing until this character goes because they're gonna go after all the bad guys. But then there's another one where it's like you have to guess which side to hit the thing on because the boss is underground.
Yeah.
And I was staring at the screen like, okay, there's got to be like a tell that shows me like what side this guy's going to be on. And if there is one, I didn't figure it out. It was so frustrating.
I'm convinced that one is a 50-50 because like
Yeah.
I was getting it pretty consistently for a while, so I thought it was, oh, okay, he just always swaps sides. So I kept going back and forth, and I was hitting him every time.
Yeah.
And then one time he popped back up on the same side, and I was like, oh. So then I started like looking at the screen and being like, are there tells? Are there like motions that he's doing? And no, I think it's just a 50-50. Or if there is something, it's so subtle that I cannot begin to discern what it would be.
And if you're not high stats enough, the dude's just going to wallop you if you miss it.
Yeah, he does. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I do find that a lot of the appeal of this game is really in its management stuff, is in building a castle, building an army, getting all these characters, having that feeling of constructing things. And so that way it does remind me of Eiyuden Chronicle Rising, which like a lot of the appeal there was like the action RPG stuff was good. It wasn't bad. But a lot of the appeal was doing all that stuff and then coming back to the town and building parts of the town and establishing that town as you delve deeper and deeper and getting different things there. Is that still kind of the same with Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes, where like a lot of the appeal is just you are building a really big party and you are building a really big castle and you're doing all these things that build those up?
Yeah, so far from what I've seen, the thing about Suikoden that I'll always remember is having that castle and having the people in the castle and who like to hang out at the bar and, oh, here's the unicorn in the meadow, and just kind of like, you know, can hang out and where the pond is and all that cool stuff. The thing with Suikoden 2 in particular, but just the world, that really transfers into Eiyuden Chronicles very well, is how cool the character designs are. And just like, here's a kangaroo guy. Why? Fuck you. That's why. And it's just like, here's a wolf guy. Why? Because you're all furries. You all know it. You know, you got me there, Mr. Game. So, yeah, it's just the imagination is there. And when you see that kind of accumulated in one spot, like a pub or the castle, it's just like, oh, I love these little weird guys and the sharks that are looking up into the sky.
Yeah.
There's one character you get early on who you have to do the like hunt 3 boars for to recruit him. And he was my favorite because he was basically Academy Sports and Outdoors Fabio, because he had like long flowing hair and was like built like Fabio, but then was wearing like jeans and football pads. Like I could not describe his attire any other way. So he's just a dude with like a hunting crossbow and football pads and jeans, but like this long flowing hair, and this whole like vibe was just, I'm a hunter. I do hunting. And like that was it. Like his personality starts and ends there. And in some ways I do like that. I think like one note joke characters can work. There's another one you get around that time who he's wearing this big pink jacket and he's like shirtless. He's got like the waist bandages. Yeah, and he's got like, he always has his hands in his pockets and he like kicks everybody, and he has this move where instead of defending, he like charges up. So when he defends, he also like powers up his attacks, and then his next attack can do more damage. And yeah, oh my god, he steamrolls some early bosses.
It's not just extra damage, it's like so much more damage.
It is ridiculously more damage, especially if you do like his armor piercing strike or something like that. He just wallops people. But he's like a one note character. Or Francesca is actually probably one of my favorite
Oh, I was gonna bring
characters.
her up. She's so good.
She's like a healer who then gets really mad and pissed off.
Yeah.
Like she's like, back off, bro, and stuff. Like it starts getting into this real like tough guy talk all of a sudden, and then is like, I'm a healer. What do you need?
Oh,
Who's hurt?
she's like a traditional healer from like a Tales game mixed with like Lunch from Dragon Ball and like Duke Nukem.
Yeah, yeah.
My favorite kind of healer.
She says some horrible things. Like it's
Every time we're in combat, like everyone's just kind of fighting. They're like, "Let's do it. I'll get him." Then she's like, "I'm gonna kill you." And like, I'm like, "Oh
she
my
says
god!"
something like, "I'm gonna smash your head down your throat so that you'll like taste your own intestines" or something
Yes,
like that.
yeah. She
She's
like
unhinged.
escalates, and I love her. But that's the thing is like sometimes the one note character works. Sometimes the
Yeah.
one note character can be really effective, and other times like Academy Sports and Outdoors Fabio, I'm just like, did you get isekai'd? Like what happened here? Like what's going on? Are you okay? Do you need help? Like,
They're
I
definitely not afraid to be silly.
Yeah.
And like to your point, after you advance a little bit and you get your castle, you get like this blueprint thing. I don't know if either of y'all saw that.
Not yet.
It's really cool because it. Go ahead.
I think I did. Are you talking about the thing where you kind of like map out the upgrades and stuff like that? Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool because like it gives you not only it gives you visuals on like how you're going to be upgrading your castle,
Mm-hmm.
but it'll also show you in the UI like in order to get this you need a specific character, and it'll have a little silhouette of that character that will be completely dark until you encounter that person. So you don't even need to like have them before they show up. So it's like it's a really good way to like keep track of like recruitables, which I think is like long time been a Suikoden thing. Like you'll be playing and someone sicko on the side will be working on a recruitment guide, and it's like here's this person and here's where they are and what they do and
Mm-hmm.
whether or not you can miss them or whatnot. And I haven't played the older games enough to know what the like parallel to that is, but I feel like it's really well implemented here. It's very clear. It doesn't hide a lot of information from you, and it's very helpful for like, okay, well, if I want to progress the castle more, then I need to look for whoever fits in this slot.
I think it's one of the places where you do see some modernization seeping in,
Mhm.
and that's actually the part that I like, because I think some of the other places where I have more frustration is where it felt like they were maybe overly reverent to the past and what Suikoden is supposed to be, because
Yeah.
I'm sure there's been a lot of complaints about like using save points in 2024. I am kind of like back and forth on it. I don't think it's like a deal breaker for me, but I do think that especially in some areas the save points are a little too like far and few between. So
Yeah.
it does become a thing. I also there's a lot of just walking around that happens, and
Yeah.
oddly enough, with the lack of random encounters, it makes all of the walking feel redundant.
Mhm.
Because like if there were random encounters that were happening, I think of like my game design brain goes, okay, well, you need to walk a lot and not fast travel or use other methods that skip those things, because while you're walking you get into random encounters, and random encounters give you XP that lets you kind of meet the power curve of the game as it goes.
Yeah.
Right
Yeah.
here, that's again like the random encounters, at least it sounds like it might be a bug, it might be a situation that's on like the technical side, but they're not happening often enough, so I feel like I'm just walking across land for a very long period of time in this game. And even like if there were random encounters, there are just times where I'm having to run back and forth and go to this thing. There was a recruitment quest I did recently that was in a dungeon, and it was in a small dungeon that I could only access half of because like guards and stuff were blocking off the rest of it. And I was still having to run back and forth across this like tiny section probably 3 times just to like do the thing that the game wanted me to do. And then I fought like one monster that I just like bopped once on the head and it died. It was like, you recruited me. And I was like, wow, that was okay. I might be
Yeah.
That was fun.
overleveled. But
Yeah. It
yeah.
goes back to what you were saying about like the beginning of the game being really slow and kind of awkward, almost like they kind of were piecing that one together a little less seamlessly. I ran into stuff like item capacity was like a
Oh
huge
my
problem early on.
God, yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
that was always a
Yes.
big thing in Suikoden, so I guess they brought that back for everyone's joy.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. You
Can
get
you break down
storage
the
once you get the
numbers?
castle. Oh,
Yeah.
go for it.
It's because like the way it works is that you get they're healing herbs, right? And revival
Mhm.
medicine and like things that do different things. And you can only hold so many of them in a stack before it starts a
Mm-hmm.
new stack. So
Mm-hmm.
then
Yep.
if I buy 18 healing herbs, I'm going to get 3 stacks of 6 herbs because 6 is like the designated amount that you're allowed to hold of one of those and have it take up one inventory slot before it takes up another.
Yeah.
In theory, I think this is a interesting like it's an interesting and good gameplay idea because it did force me early on to make hard choices about what I was buying, how I was spending my money, what do I want on this excursion. I think that's like a compelling. I'm the weirdo that thinks that like inventory limits can be a really good thing in RPGs.
Can.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna love Earthbound.
Here's the flip side. I was playing one of these early dungeons and they were just throwing runes at me. And
Yep.
Right.
runes
Mhm.
are basically things that you can sometimes slot into a character. By the way, the rune system is messy early on. I don't know if it gets better as it goes on, but I was having so much trouble even understanding what they wanted me to do with
Runes were
runes early
always
on.
kind of weird in Suikoden, I find. So I guess they kind of transfer that over to
Uh,
lenses.
but basically, like I had probably about anywhere from 10 to 12 runes that I had picked up in like one dungeon run, plus 2 or 3 that I had bought because I was like, oh, I might be able to use these. You can't equip any new runes until your characters hit a certain level. So they have to hit
Mm-hmm.
a level. And then once they hit that level, some of them may not have an open rune slot because them hitting that level opens up this rune that they already had and just is kind of their
Yeah.
new bonus move. So I had all these runes and I was like hoarding them and I was like, yes, cool. I'm about to hit level 14 and then all my characters are going to get a new rune slot and I can get all these freaking runes out of my backpack and they'll all have new magic and new abilities or like better stats. And like half of them couldn't even get a new, and like they couldn't get a new rune because they got some new cool ability. And I was like, okay, that's nice. But also, why are you throwing runes at me if I can't put them anywhere? Like, I
Have all the runes in
Yeah.
the
it
world.
was a little maddening early on because
Mm.
even if the idea was maybe you go and you swap out the runes, none of the runes that you have early on are worth swapping out because they're usually all abilities. They're like, oh, this is like how you have the basic special attack
Yeah.
that this character has. Or
Yeah.
Mhm.
in the case of like Francesca, she has a water rune, which is like a basic rune that any like spellcaster can equip to do healing stuff. But she is
Mhm.
like the one healer you have at this point in the game. Why would you take the healing rune off of her just to add like fire magic or something?
Yeah.
Maybe there's like
Yeah,
a speed
exactly.
run strat for that, but like there's not really a lot of sense behind it as a casual player. And so so the inventory thing drove me nuts because half my inventory was just runes, and I finally hit a point where I was messaging some other people who were playing this game pre-release, and I sent a message to somebody who was further along than me. I was like, "Do I need to hold on to these?" They're like, "Honestly, like if they don't have like a special unique ability tied to them, you can probably just ditch them and then like buy them
Sell 'em.
back later
Yeah.
because." They're worth a decent amount of gold, which is good for upgrading your weapons and stuff early on, which is like
Mhm.
a much more meaningful and immediate upgrade. And then you get that stuff out of your inventory so you're not running into a dungeon where you're like, well, I'm already at like 27 out of 30. I can't hold anything. Do I need to start dropping anti-venom and stuff like that?
Hmm.
Uh,
The
yeah.
answer to that is yes. Get rid of
Yes.
those because you won't use them.
Yeah. There's a lot of like just
Yeah.
design decisions in this game that I'm like, I kind of get what you're going for, but it feels like this should have been caught and addressed at some point in the pipeline because
Yeah.
the systems
Yeah.
don't
Fast travel
click.
also doesn't come up until like 15, 20 hours in, depending on your pace.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I feel like once you have your headquarters and you're filling out characters and everything, like the stuff starts to make more sense. But early on,
Well,
when you have no way of knowing, it's kind of like, oh,
Yeah, those
what
those
I,
first like 10 hours are like you're really trying to get through the game to get to the part that is what you are
Fireworks
expecting from
Factory.
this game. Yeah. There's
yeah,
even a stealth section. Why is there a stealth section? Why Why?
That part was so
Some
silly.
people like those. I don't understand why,
No,
but some
I
people like.
if you are someone who likes a stealth section in a game that is not a stealth video game, like we're not talking about like you're playing, I don't know, Splinter Cell and you're playing stealth, or even you're playing like, I don't know, The Last of Us and like stealth is important in that, okay? A game that does not need to have a stealth section, that is not a stealth game, that has not had stealth mechanics, but then all of a sudden they're like, what if we had guys with vision cones and you had to hide in barrels and sneak around them? And I'm just,
Oh
there,
God, get them doctors. What's going on with their
it's
eyes?
also ridiculous because there's like a cutscene that happens in the middle of that stealth section and everyone is just standing there in the open, and I feel like there's a guard with a like flashlight or something, like 3 feet away from them in clear view, and they're all just like standing there talking, and I'm like, this is
Listen,
oh
it's really dark. Okay,
It's very dark.
never
You
never
can't see
mind
anything.
that all your friends can talk to each other, no problem.
uh-huh
It's
yeah,
really
yeah.
dark.
Well, everyone
You
knows
gotta
that
understand.
audio doesn't travel far in darkness, you know.
No,
Exactly.
it muffles it.
Audio dies in darkness. So the O1 asks in the Twitch chat, are there missable recruitable characters? I do not
Yes.
know the answer to that, but Lucas, you say yes, yeah?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
have heard people getting like 80 out of 100 or something like that.
It doesn't sound like there's a ton of missables, but there are missables, yeah. And then also ones you just have to find them, which
Yeah.
they may as well be. But yeah.
Interesting.
Is there a unicorn? Sweet.
There's always got to be that in a game where there's like characters like this. So you gotta make the replay people lose their minds a little bit.
Any closing thoughts here on Eiyuden Chronicle? Lucas, I'll pass it off to you first.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of problems, and like I think our discussion's been dominated by talking about problems. But I think it's also a totally like solid game with a lot of good stuff about it. I think especially like if you like your classic JRPGs, maybe you want it to have them with a little more juice, a little character movement, some fancy lighting, that kind of thing. I think this does that really well. I think a lot of the characters are a lot of fun. There's definitely like a lot of positives to go with the negatives.
Yeah.
But just, maybe hold off if you want to buy it on a non-PC platform and see how that goes in the coming weeks. But yeah, solid 7. I gave it a 7, and I think it's like an enthusiastic 7.
Nadia, how are you feeling about it so far?
We've kind of sat here and dumped on it a lot, but I feel like at its heart, like I said, it is what I want from a Suikoden successor. It has that spirit, it has that creativity, it has that, hey, cool, let's build a castle and all be pals. I feel like this is the kind of game where it will get a lot of retooling over the coming months. I could see them fixing a lot of the problems that we've talked about pretty easily. And we've already gotten word of a sequel, so I think that any of the really baked-in problems that this game has can very potentially be addressed and fixed with the next game. And that's exciting because you think about how much Octopath 2 improved over Octopath 1. So I really want to see this studio established and see what comes next for them. The only really big disappointment for me is that its performance is just, I think that's borderline unacceptable that you have these games, if not unacceptable, people backed you. I mean, Switch is going to switch. People can optimize. Maybe they can't. Like Lucas said, there's a billion reasons why that might or might not happen. But PS5, Steam Deck, come on, come on,
Yeah.
let's go. Let's get this done.
Yeah, I feel bad kind of dumping on it so much because now that I'm at the point where I have all these tools, like the party recruitment is happening, the castle building is happening, I can kind of see the game that they were wanting to make and the sort of fire they were wanting to spark. I do enjoy it. I want to see it through, and I think this game, we didn't talk too much about it because I don't want to get into spoilers, but I think some of the grand politics stuff does work pretty well. I don't know if I love the main villain, Dukes Aldrich, who is the most like villain dude that shows up
just
pretty
like
early on.
from like the first hour on, it's like, oh, you have a mad face, you're the villain.
Yeah, he
Yeah, yeah,
very
yeah.
much had like, oh, here's our Luca Blight, and he is not really a Luca Blight. He's kind
Only
of
Luca
like
Blight is Luca Blight.
he's like a
Can't copy him.
Luca mild, but he's he's fine. I like some of the other characters, like Perrine, I think her name is the leader of Eltis Vice that you meet pretty early on. I like her character a
Yeah,
lot.
she's really cool.
I also love her butler Janquis, just because that name is incredible. Every time she
Yes,
says it,
yes.
Janquis. I'm like, yes. I like the characters a lot. I think the loop feels good, and this is the sort of game that I could see myself getting really into during the summer, like when I was a kid and
Mm.
I just wanted an RPG that was
Hmm.
going to eat up my summer. Like, this is that game, and that's what kind of bums me out, that this is not a game that's going to perform well right now on the Switch or the Steam Deck. Is like, it seems perfect for that. It seems so well
Yeah.
suited to
Exactly.
that, and it missing the mark there and really being like the best performance case on PC, and everything else kind of being like, well, it works, but caveats and stuff like that. It is kind of a bummer, and it seems like it's going to go through a similar cycle to Bloodstained,
That's what I was
Ritual of the
thinking.
Night.
Yeah.
Yeah, where it comes out and it does the thing, and it feels very reverential, and this big homage, but also it's going to go through patching and patching and
Yeah.
patching. And I hope it does, because I would like more people to try this game out. I even think it's a very approachable game if you're newer to RPGs than a lot of other stuff.
Mhm.
Uh, but man, it just really needs those patches to get it there. Some stuff you can't really excise and tune, like the kill feed's gonna stay. But
Mm.
uh, I I
Kill
do
feed.
I do hope the performance and stuff gets addressed, because that would be a real bummer if it didn't. Uh, and that leads us into random encounters. I left some space there for you to play the music. uh, in which the team behind Aiden Chronicle, Rabbit and Bear, have confirmed in a recent AMA that they are moving forward with a sequel. So we will get
Yes.
more Aiden Chronicle. The Aiden Chronicle will continue. Uh, Jetting off of that, Dragon's Dogma 2 is getting a patch to make Dragon's Plague less rampant and more obvious. Visions of Mana won't have co op. Todd Howard says Bethesda is doing, quote, a lot of work on Starfield. Baldur's Gate 3 Patch 7 is on the way with official mod support and improved evil endings. And there is a Nintendo Indie World Showcase. SteamWorld Heist 2 is the big headline. It arrives August 8 and looks pretty fantastic. You can
It
head over
does.
to IGN.com to read Kat Bailey's interview with the team for more information. Kat took some time away from painting Warhammer minifigs to talk to the team about SteamWorld Heist 2.
Smoking them is what she was doing.
But for now, we are rolling into the tavern, kicking our feet up, grabbing a potion, and talking about the games not named Aiden Chronicle that we've been playing lately. And I'm going to kick it over to Lucas, who is rubbing hands together.
Oh boy, oh
Yeah.
boy, oh boy.
I'm really, can I say, family friendly, or not family friendly language?
Oh god, yeah.
Yes,
Um,
yeah. No,
I'm on my bullshit in a lot of ways right now, and it feels really good. Even like professionally, which is great. I'm playing the new Saga, which I can say because they put a demo out, so
Mhm.
their embargo got a little lighter. Having a heck of a time with that game. I'm also playing Class of Heroes.
Oh my
Um,
god, I did a review of Class of Heroes like when it was on the PSP, like for
yeah,
GamePro.
yeah.
I still have the
So,
disc. It's like a pre-built disc.
oh, that's awesome. I've got one of those for Disgaea 4 that I accidentally got to keep, and I will never get rid of
Whoops.
it.
Send it back. What?
Well, if you forget to send it back long enough, they just like, oh, you just keep it.
Yeah, pretty much.
Pro tip. But yeah, so that's coming out very soon on like the Switch and PC and stuff. It's a dungeon RPG from Acquire, who you probably know from Octopath Traveler these days.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, shit.
Yeah. Originally on the PSP. Also, I don't think it's the case with the first one, but it's a package deal with 1 and 2. 2 was localized by Gaijin Works, so there's a little bit of working designs DNA floating around in there, for better or worse.
Oh, right, yeah.
Makes that kind of interesting. Yeah, it's a DRPG, very very traditional in a lot of ways, very wizardry meets anime. and just playing it on the Switch has been really, really good.
It would be a good Switch game from what I remember on the PSP.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it just reinforces a lot of ways that like a lot of this stuff that made kind of like the PSP and the Vita stay afloat for people kind of in our purview is reappearing on the Switch, which has been really cool.
Heck yeah. Would you say it's a very approachable DRPG?
Absolutely not. This game
No, it was
messes with
pretty. It
you
was pretty.
from the jump.
Pretty dense, as I remember.
Yeah, like it's cool because like you have your character building stuff at the start where it's like you can re-roll your stat numbers and all this fun stuff and play around and you can get like your end game classes right at the start if you want. But it's pretty approachable that way. But then like you go in the very first dungeon and you step on an electrified tile and half your party dies and you're just like, oh,
Yeah.
Yep, this is what I'm playing.
Real, as you say, real classic wizardry kind of stuff.
Oh yeah. So yeah, that's that game. I love it, but you know it comes with those.
If you like
those
Saga, I
warnings.
can see why you like it.
Yeah.
It does
It's
feel like
similarities.
we're in like an age of people coming back to the wizardry style of like wanting to do those first person dungeon crawlers. I feel like I've seen and talked about so many games that are either harkening back to wizardry or Ultima. There's like a real love for the classic RPG form that is reemerging, and so to see some of the games that kind of carried the torch over the years get their love on Switch and other platforms is cool. I'm glad that's happening.
For sure.
And what's the one that came out recently? You really liked Demon Lord.
Demon Lord Reincarnation, which I
That
think
game
is
is literally wizardry and Saga smushed together,
Oh god,
Yeah.
and
that sounds like
it's
pain.
wonderful.
I think it's getting like a HD version or something like that. It was recently announced. I'm double checking to make sure. But Grave Robber Foundation, yeah, Demon Lord Reincarnation Gaiden, which
Hell
is
yeah, stole that from Wizardry too.
yeah, enjoy a new scenario with new character classes and improved games systems and a bunch of other stuff where they're adding tons of new stuff and they're working on it right now. Really happy that's happening because that was a real surprise that I really
Yeah.
enjoyed. But yeah, we're just back in it. This is the time. Square Enix,
DRPGs, man. Yeah,
make
This is
dungeon
the time.
encounters too.
The era of pain.
Make Final Fantasy dungeon encounters. I don't know why. Like I've had this discussion with people before that like if the original dungeon encounters just had Final Fantasy stuff in it, it might have been like a surprise
agree.
hit because I think that game
Kind of like
was
putting the
so good.
Nintendo characters over the Smash wireframes.
Yeah. Can you imagine if that whole game was just you're doing the same stuff that you were doing in dungeon encounters, but the idea is that you're like diving down with like parties of popular Final Fantasy characters a la Theat Rhythm or something like that, where it's just
I
a
would play that in
Right.
5 seconds flat.
or it's like
I'd
Persona
probably,
Q. Yeah.
I'd probably
The
pay for
Dissidia
characters.
thing,
I'm so
yeah.
stupid. Dissidia was great. Like Dissidia was
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
I like Final Fantasy crossover content. It's good.
Chocobo Racing. Once they took out the microtransactions, solid game.
Original Chocobo Racing even. I used to have that on the
too.
PlayStation 1. I enjoyed it.
The new one's got Steiner in it though, so
Nice.
Nadia, what have you been playing?
I mentioned I've been playing a bit of Nier Automata, which I hadn't played before, playing that for the upcoming Pantheon. And yeah, this is my first playthrough through the game, and it very much gives me the feeling of, am I doing the right thing at the right time? Am I following the story the way it should be followed? Because I know there's like a million endings, and some of them are
don't
really
need
messed
to
up.
worry about that. I'm just going to tell
No?
you. Yeah, so
But just follow my heart.
Yeah.
without spoilers, the way that
Yeah.
it works is that there is kind of one main path that is really hard to do wrong in Nier Automata, and that will get you endings A through E, and that is like the proper flow of the game. Is like once you have finished ending E, you have seen Nier Automata in its entirety.
Right.
But there are also endings F through Z, or Z, depending on where you're from, in which those are all kind of joke endings or just like what if endings that happen if you do certain things. Like there's one, if you've already played the intro, so you know about the black box, right?
Yeah.
So you can theoretically use that right now if you want to. It's in your inventory. You can just pull your black box out and use it. and that's an ending because that's the ending there.
It's an ending. That's enough.
But then it's just like, oh, 2B did this and this thing happened, but reload
That's
your
pretty
save,
funny.
get back to it. Yeah. So that those are the other endings. But I will say that where near replicant, I feel like there has to be more of a guide to be like, this is what you need to do. These are the things you need to proceed to certain routes. And also I think the way that game kind of always funnels back to its ending, and you're just kind of like revising the ending, whereas Near Automata feels like a more linear path to the
Hmm.
end.
Yeah,
Not in a
it's
bad
like
way,
it's like
just in a
Drakengard, where you
yeah.
press New Game Plus, but it's really you're just pressing continue.
Yes.
Okay,
It's like
Yeah,
so
you're
I'll
you're
just
totally
constantly
linear. Yeah.
just going forward. The only thing I will say, and I'm remembering this now, is like make sure you drop a save before you go into the like sea stuff. You will know what I'm
mm,
talking about when you get there, but when you're going into like what feels like the climax of the sea stuff, uh drop an extra save or something just to make sure, cuz if you don't, then you end up having to do some like bothersome stuff to like see the rest of it, whereas
yeah,
if you have those extra saves, it just makes it a little bit easier. It makes your life better.
that's always good to know. Yeah,
Mhm.
But I do
I
think
trapped
that
myself in a save with FF7 Rebirth.
how are you enjoying Nier Automata, like gameplay wise?
Oh, very much. I just like its tone. I like its vibe.
Hmm.
Mhm.
It's a very compact game, which I appreciate. Like we're talking about how Eiyuden Chronicles kind of meanders. This game, if you want to get somewhere, it's pretty quick. You
Yeah.
can run like endlessly, or you can just get on a moose, which I like to do. I like to bowl over
I
enemies
forgot
and
about the moose.
Hmm.
moose.
Hmm.
Um, I'm doing some of the side quests. Some of them are a bit messed up. Like I was saying to the before the show started, I did the Romeo and Juliet play, which was
Hmm.
Mm.
the funniest, saddest thing I've ever seen. And that was just me being like, hey, I'll do the stupid quest where you get stamps, and I got these stamps, and that was a messed up thing on its own. But it's just what it wants to be, and I appreciate games that are what they want to be. That's why I like
Yeah.
Simogo. That's why I like Sinora Wild Hearts and just like 13
Hmm.
Sentinels. Anything Vanillaware does, just like we want to do this, so we're gonna do it. You don't like it, don't play it. And I like the fact that Nier is kind of like that. Like Yoko Taro's like, here's my weird game I make no apologies for. The chick is hot to like hot chicks. I'm like, I appreciate that. Thank you for just
Yeah.
being honest with me. So
You're
yeah, so
playing it on
far,
Switch, right?
yeah, it actually runs
Yeah.
very well. My only
It's a
complaint
really
is
good
load
port.
times.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Some of the fast travel load times are a bit ridiculous, but it's since it's a small world, I usually just kind of run where I'm going anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. I I'm not playing it for the Pantheon because I know I'm going to be playing it for Normandy in the future, and so I'm saving my playthrough for that. But I recently, like 2017, played Nier Automata and absolutely loved it. And I love that this is a game that I hope for you it does what it did for me, which is get you so interested that you then want to go and play Nier Replicant. Because I do think that Near Automata by itself is a really impressive and phenomenal game, and I cannot wait to like go back to it and play it again. But
Hmm.
adding in Near Replicant and like tying those two games together just escalates my love for that series. Like they're two very different games, but the ways they connect and share ideas and themes, I love Near as a series. I'm super bummed about the mobile game and how that has all been handled
Oh, I heard
so
about
far.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I heard that it's essentially like I don't know if it was you saying, but someone on Twitter was saying that it is essentially a story heavy app or game or whatever you want to call it that ties up a lot of story,
Yeah.
like from like what happened after Near Automata, for example. And it's just that's an important thing to kill.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
it's going to be a big slice of the near pie that gets left in the ether of the internet, which is kind of a bummer. Uh,
Yeah.
but I guess that's the world we live in when we put story in mobile games. Uh,
Unfortunately, I wish they'd stop doing that. If you're gonna kill the games, please just save the stories.
yeah. Speaking of story in games, I don't know if that's a segue. Uh, I've been playing the Hades 2 technical test.
Oh
Uh,
crap, how's
Oh
that
my
going?
god.
boy, that is more Hades in the best ways possible.
Awesome.
I I really, really enjoy it. I've had to like stop myself from playing it too much because what's in there right now is very slim. It's basically just the first stratum, like tier, whatever you want to call it, like the first area that you can run of the game, all the way up to the first boss that you can face.
Hmm.
Mhm.
For those who don't know, Hades, original Hades, a roguelite action RPG game made by Supergiant Games, one of these studios that I will say I will always be there for whatever
Yeah,
they make.
they're
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 so
great. They've always been
consistent.
great.
Yeah. This is the first time they've done a sequel. It's kind of strange in that
That's a
regard
good
because
point. Yeah.
they've never really done a sequel before. They've always just kind of made something new, and even Hades was kind of them incorporating a lot of things they learned from Bastion, from Transistor, from Pyre, and turning it all into one game. But now they're taking that and trying to build out from it. And I was really curious what that would mean when you take a game that is like all of Supergiant up to now and then try to do a sequel to it, which is something they've never done. How are they going to handle it? I am happy to say that what I've played so far proves that they are more than equipped and capable of doing such a task. The actions you play as Melinoe, who is, or Malinoe, Malinoe, I think is how it's pronounced. You are the daughter of Hades. You are the brother of Zagreus, daughter of Hades
Mm.
and Persephone. Um, it doesn't get too deep into what has happened or how, but essentially, as the game so eloquently puts it, when you first load up, the first thing that Malinoe says is "Death to Kronos." The Titan of
Sweet.
Time is back. And is causing some sort of problem, and Malinoe is trying to dive down, it seems, into uh, presumably hell to fight Kronos because of something that Kronos did to her family. That is literally, I'm not trying to be coy, that's all I know at this point. And you have a bunch of different characters helping you out. Some are returning faces. There are some gods that return, and it's kind of interesting seeing that because in the first game it was very much like all the gods are learning about Zagreus and being like, "Oh, Zag,
Yeah.
you like I didn't know you were here. I didn't know who you were." The same thing is kind of happening with Malinoe, and learning like why that is happening and how is very interesting. But you have like Demeter, Aphrodite, Poseidon are all in the game. I haven't run into any of the other returning gods yet. I think there are other returning gods though. There's also some new ones. So Apollo is finally in. I'm very happy about that.
Oh boy, that
Uh,
loudmouth.
Hephaestus is getting a lot of love. His design is freaking incredible. Like
He's
again,
the god of the forge, right?
yes, yeah, and
Okay, yeah.
he's a big bear of a dude, and he's actually he's in a like steam, kind of steam powered, I don't know, like a mechanical wheelchair, and it looks sick. Like
Oh,
his
that's cool.
design is awesome. He's got this like big hammer hefted over his shoulder. Again, all the god designs are incredible in this game. Like yes, everybody's hot. Like the same thing that happened in Hades 1 is happening again in Hades 2. Everyone's hot, but the character design is just really something else. I think Demeter's was one of the ones that really surprised me because, you know, god of ice and snow and frost. She like shows up and she looks suited up for war. She's got like armor on and stuff like that. She looks like she's about to ride into battle.
He's the
And so
fury.
immediately I was getting a sense of like what is happening in the story. Okay, Olympus is preparing for war. Like they are
Hmm.
ready, and you start to get like hints. And I think a lot of the storytelling through art and through just pieces of info that characters give you as you go on these runs is so impressive. I forgot how this was like such an incredible part of Hades 1 was the way that they managed to not just tell a story as you're doing kind of roguelite runs and dying and returning back and getting upgrades and messing with all your stuff and then going back out, but the way in which they kind of trickle that information out is very smart, very well handled, and all the characters make it so easy for that information to come through. And
Yeah,
then
so the integration is like masterful, basically like the first game.
so
Because I
so
remember
good.
being like just so stunned at how well the writing was interwoven with the gameplay, and that's like probably the biggest challenge a video game really has to face is getting that narrative in with that those visuals, those sounds, those that
Yeah.
voice acting, the action. A small diversion. Are you excited for the Ninja Turtles Hades
So that
inspiration?
that game was already out. It was an Apple Arcade game for a long time,
Oh,
Yeah.
right, right.
and now it's getting ported. And I'm gonna be honest here on the show. I don't really have love for the turtles. Like, I don't dislike them. I just never like had nostalgia for them, so I've never really understood the love for the turtles. So I'm
Mhm.
good. Y'all turtles. I thought Shredder's Revenge was like fun. I like
Yeah,
that.
Peak
But like,
Turtles.
yeah,
that was
everything
Big
else,
Turtles.
I'm like, I don't really care. It's fine. Um, with Hades 2, the other thing I want to note is, like, again, a big question I had going in was, okay, how are you going to make this feel different if you're doing an action RPG, like same sort of vibe genre, like everything looks very similar? How is Milinoe going to handle different from Zagreus?
Right.
Because Zag kind of has four basic buttons that you're working with. You have your dash, you have your attack, your special, and your cast, right? Uh,
Mhm.
and you have different weapons, and those can all change. So you have like sword, spear, like rail gun, bow, shield, all these different things that kind of change that. But you have that basic tool set, and then you're modifying it as you get more daedalus upgrades, or you get more boons that change the way your attacks. So maybe like you get Aphrodite. Now you can inflict weaken on characters, or you can charm them, or you get Hestia is one of the ones in Hades too. So you can get fire and scorch is like really really powerful. Um, the big change in Hades 2 is that Milinoe not only has a health bar, but a magic bar, an MP bar, because she is trained by Hecate. She is a witch. She has witchy powers, and a lot of Hades 2 is leaning into the witchy sorcery. Nadia, you would love this. It's like we're going
Sounds
out into
like
the
it.
woods to do some sacrifice to
Hell
summon
yeah. Let's
something.
get
Like,
that blood flowing into the
yeah.
soil.
Yeah, it's like you literally have a cauldron that you like dump, like you can pick up different, like flowers and roots and stuff like that as you're going through these levels, and you go back to your cauldron and dump them in to like create a concoction to like pray to the fates for new boons in your crossroads that can like add to your runs. Like, it is the witchiest game.
That's cool.
Like Stevie Nicks should be like in the background just like singing over the soundtrack and stuff like that. Like, it's really good. But uh, the magic bar means that you can do omega attacks, which are kind of like you hold the button down. So you hold attack down, and instead of doing a normal attack, you kind of charge up, and this bar charges up. And instead of just doing an attack forward with the rod, for example, with the staff that you start with, it shoots a line attack out in front of you and then out behind you, and it procs everything that your normal attack
Cool.
would. You do your cast is normally when you have the staff, it kind of marks like an area on the ground, like a magic circle that can give you benefits while you're inside it. So it kind of like marks this like sacred ground for you. If you hold it, that ground will also snare enemies, and then once it dissipates, it'll damage them, which is like
Mm.
really useful. But it costs mana, it costs magic power to use, and then once you expend that, you need to build it back up through either boons you get that can recover that mana, or through attacking, I think, can also generate mana. I wasn't really sure on that. I wasn't able to like watch that like a hawk to check, but um it's this interesting balance, but also it gives them so many more like verbs to work with when you're looking at
Yeah.
boons, when you're looking at upgrades. So all the upgrades and boons start to feel really interesting and unique because you're not getting things that feel like what Zag was doing. You feel like a
Mm.
different character because you have all these potential attacks that you can do, and you have that sort of risk reward of when you do these attacks, they're powerful, but you have to charge them up and you expend resources when you use them. So now you're dealing with a different meter, with a new system that's like, okay, I could do this charge, but this dude's coming right at me. Is he going to clock me in the face before I like get this cast off? It's really, really interesting. I think they've done such a good job of making this game feel familiar but different. And I know it's going to ignite the same silly conversations we had around Tears of the Kingdom where people are going to be like, it's just DLC or something
People
like
who
that.
say that about Tears of the Kingdom need to be thrown up into outer space
Yeah, yeah.
without a suit.
So like the
Come on.
Emperor's New Groove, like throwing them out the window or
Yeah.
whatever.
Send them out there
Sorry.
with the Sunday embargo people.
Yeah, I uh, I think this game is doing so much, and it's so impressive already. And it sounds like early access is coming up soon because Supergiant did a stream where they showed off gameplay. If you aren't in the technical test, and they were basically saying that they want the tech test to run for a month ish. Is kind of what they ballpark. They didn't want to put a time frame on it. I'm not putting a time frame on it. But it sounds like they want the early access to be rolling out soon, and then that'll be when we kind of get into like, okay, everyone is playing Hades 2 proper, and it might not be content complete, it might not be full yet. If you played Hades 1 during early access, obviously you know like they were adding story stuff to that for a
Yeah.
long time. And it took a while for them to get to like version 1.0, and even like the ending of the game came before version 1.0, I want to say. But I just cannot wait, and I'm definitely not going to hold off and wait until 1.0 or whatever. I'm not going to wait for this game to be content complete. I can't. I'm not strong
I'm actually
enough.
wondering, like, I might do that because I'm glad I did that with the first Hades, but I was ignorant about the first Hades. I remember hearing about it and being like, "Oh, that sounds cool. I'll check it out." Like Super Giant, see what happens when they're done. But now hearing about it, not just from you, but from other people, it's like, I am not an early access person, but I might be this time around.
I think the early access is also going to be a little bit more robust than you're used to.
Hmm.
Just because, like, even what I'm seeing in the technical test, and this is largely based off of that, but what I'm seeing in the technical test is like, this game feels really good already. It feels like there's a lot of stuff in there already that is surprising to me as someone that has played a lot of like alphas and tech tests before. This is a
Yeah,
pretty
same.
robust one. Like this is a pretty solid one. And then if early access is only going to have more, it's going to continue to build. Uh Sign me up. I'm good.
Yeah,
I'm in.
for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, the first
So,
game, a lot of that was about them really figuring out what it was, right? Like, I
mhm.
That's
feel like it was
true.
way
Yeah.
more experimental.
Mhm.
Now
So
they
now
have an
they've got a
idea of what they
foundation.
want.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'm especially interested what they do with the story because I think the story and the writing has been really really good so far, but I'm really curious about how they end up kind of spinning this story about. And one teaser I'll leave you with. So when you go, you're running through the crossroads, which is kind of your base camp, where like Hecate and Odysseus and Nemesis and some other characters kind of like hang out. Uh, and then you run into the weapon area, which is where you can fight Skelemaeus, who is
I saw
a
him.
familiar looking character in regal garb. Uh, and you can pick your weapon. You can also pick a like a resource gathering thing that you take with you. So I got a pickaxe that lets me get silver as I run through to get more resources. Resources really seem like they're going to be big in this game, maybe even more so than Hades one. But you pick all that stuff, and then normally in Hades 1 you have that like go out, right? Like that's how you start your run.
Mhm.
In Hades 2, there are two doors. One
Mhm.
is go out, and that's the one you can go through, and the other one is blocked by a ward and says go up question mark.
Go up.
Ooh.
Very curious about what that is. Very very curious about what that might be. Uh there's already a lot of theories floating around the Hades like zone, the Hades fandom,
Hades
about
Zone.
what might happen there.
Hades Zone Act One.
My personal hope for a Hades DLC was always some sort of climb up Olympus. I always thought that would be really
Mm.
really cool. I don't, again, pure speculation, 100% speculation zone. I don't know if that's the case, but man, just the fact that there are two doors, the fact that there's something else that like we don't even know about yet, like there are two options. I cannot wait to
They're teasing it
uncover
right
that.
up front.
Yeah, and
Just
it's
like
right there, it's just sitting there. And there's even like there are other doors and stuff that obviously you will probably unlock with resources and things like that, like you did in the first game, that I'm just dying to know like what is happening in this world, what has happened to all of the characters that we know and love. There are again some returning faces, some other characters that I have not seen yet. So like Dusa has not shown back up yet, Meg has not shown back up yet, Thanatos has not shown back up yet.
my love, come back.
Like a lot of characters who I'm going like, I wonder what is happening with all of these
Hmm.
characters, and what has caused this situation to occur, and even like I'll say for now the like time that has elapsed is what I will say, because that's also an interesting note, because obviously Zag reunites, all that stuff happens in Hades 1. There's not a like sister at that point in time. So this is taking
Right.
place at least some amount of time after Hades 1. And so I'm really curious like what has happened in the interim and what got us here to the point that Malinoe is now diving to take vengeance in some way. Death to Kronos. I love. They keep saying it over and over again. That's like their mantra. They're like, remember, death to Kronos, and I'm just like, hell yeah, hell yeah. It's like it's so good. It's so effective. It's so
That's a
punchy.
very good driver. Like
Yeah,
it's a very simple but good driver. Death to
yeah,
Kronos. What does it mean? We'll find out. Let's
yeah.
do it. I don't know what it is. Let's do it.
Like the whole idea. They keep playing with the idea of like, how do you stop time? Like because time is such a powerful force. Like it exists outside of most other domains of the other gods. That like, how do you stop time is literally like a major part of a lot of like the theming that is happening right now, and it's really compelling. It's really interesting, and Supergiant is one of those studios I'd be like, I trust them to handle something like this,
Yeah,
because
they can do
again,
whatever they want.
we
They can
talk a
fly a
lot
jumbo
about
jet.
we talk about how good their designs and their music. Oh my god, the Hades 2 music is just bangers, 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 bangers all the way down. We talk about how good their gameplay is, their character designs, everything. But like the stories of Bastion, Transistor, and Pyre are also incredible. Some
Oh, they're great.
really incredible writing in there. I love Transistor as a like story. I love Pyre and how it had ideas about how to create stories through that. And Bastion, oh my god, Bastion's such a good story. Uh, I cannot wait to see what they do here. So yeah, Hades too. I could go
82. Let's
on.
let's
I
go.
could keep going, but we don't need to.
Oh, yeah.
Instead, we need to hear from Nadia for a little bit of nostalgia before we go.
So, yesterday was the weed day, and this is interesting because it ties into something Sacred MD said in the chat, which is going back to Ninja Turtles. In the UK, the government was so horrified about the idea of marketing ninjas to kids, they refused to allow TMNT to be shown here in the 80s. So the show and the tune was renamed to Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles. And I know that because my brother, around the time Ninja Turtles became huge, like my older brother spent the summer with some cousin of mine well, yeah, I actually still know the cousins. Like, some cousins of mine in Ireland, and he came home with a shirt that said Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles, and I'm like, what the fuck is that? And then what really got me was instead of like heroes in a half shell, you got one good turtle deserves another was the slogan. I'm like, what does that mean?
Like one good turn deserves
One
another,
good
but with
turtle
turtles.
deserves another. I guess one good
Yeah.
turn deserves another. It's like that's a very British thing somehow. I just feel like, but so that ties into the weed day because Ninja Turtles and weed go together for many reasons. Ironically, because when I was a kid, the Ninja Turtles were like, "Hey kids, don't do drugs," and everyone knew Michelangelo was on it. Like, come on, he's
Right,
like
right, right.
the ambassador for weed
He's
even
like,
these days.
bro.
But it kind of got me thinking. It's like, okay, in Canada we have some infamous PSAs about drugs and stuff like that. They tend to go a little more hardcore than the American ones because I do remember uh, there's an American one where like the Ninja Turtles are like, oh don't take drugs, and the guy uses the insult, "You're a turkey," for in giving him drugs. First of all, as someone who was like quite aware during the whole quote unquote war on drugs and lived in a metropolis, which is like by the accounts of suburbanites like a dirty, terrible, dangerous place. I've never once been offered drugs by anyone in any capacity on any playground in any universe. So it kind of got me thinking, like, did you guys like, were you like old enough to remember the war on drugs and be like influenced by like Michelangelo saying eat pizza instead of like doing drugs? Did that work on any of you?
Absolutely not.
Like winners don't use drugs and all that.
Winners
Like
don't do drugs. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I remember
Did you
Dare and
recognize
everything.
it for bullshit from like day one? Because I hope you did.
no, most of my like reticence to use drugs came more from like God, from
Hey
religion.
kids,
Yeah, yeah.
do
No,
drugs.
my early life reticence to use drugs was more from a holy guilt than a like the Ninja Turtles might not like me if I did that. Like,
The turtles are gonna kill me if I use drugs.
yeah, GI Joe's gonna come up and tell me about why that was a bad idea. Yeah.
there is a GI Joe where it's I can't remember his name. Doc, I think, is like, hey, don't take your dad's medicine. It's like, what are you talking about? That's where the good medicine is. Dad has the fun stuff. But yeah, in Canada, like I think a lot of our PSAs got popular because the nostalgia nerd uh, kind of looked at them and
Mm.
said, "Wow, this shit's crazy." Like you guys, I know even though you're American, you know about the house hippo, of course, right?
The
Yeah.
house
So
House
hippo?
Hippo.
you don't know what the fuck the
No.
house hippo is? Please look
The
that up.
the house hippo.
Oh my
The
god.
house hippo. This was a iconic PSA that is still referenced in Canadian meme culture, where the children's what are they called? The children's advertisers or something like that. Like some group that's meant to kind of tell kids, hey, what you see on TV is not necessarily real. And they proved it by doing this quote unquote like documentary about a quote unquote house hippo. And they have this little tiny footage of this little tiny hippo going around like harassing the cat and stuff like that. And at the end of the thing, they tell you like that looked really real, but it wasn't real. It's not everything you see on TV is real, kids. And yeah, the house hippo lives in infamy.
The house
Incredible.
hippo. Okay.
But that's the kind of PSAs we had. Like my favorite is still like there's just a bunch of kids singing drugs, 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 which are good, which are bad, drugs, drugs, drugs. Ask your mom or ask your dad. So of course everyone who's ever smoked weed in Canada has done it to that like, drugs, 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 which are good, which are bad. This is ironic and funny, and it is actually.
Amazing. Yeah,
But
we
like
had.
what I love about that is you look at the YouTube comments and the people who were there are like, oh yeah, we made up our own lyrics, whereas like drugs, 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 all are good, all are bad, drugs, 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 dealing with your mom and dad, like just stuff like that. Like that's what I love about being a kid.
Yeah,
Don't
I
you put it
remember
in your mouth.
McGruff pretty quick, clearly, who was like the
He
dog in
got
a trench
arrested
coat.
for the guy who does his
Uh-huh.
voice got arrested for killing someone, or I don't know, like he's in jail for
Well,
something.
McGruff took too big of a
That's
bite
not
out of
surprising.
crime.
Yeah.
McGruff pulling down like the Rorschach mask.
Saw
The
it
system
wrapped his stomach burst
wasn't doing
open.
enough. He had to take the law into his own mandibles.
It was I don't think mammals have mandibles, but I like the visual. Can
Yeah.
you imagine like McGruff with the alien face or the predator face?
Time to take crime by the jowls.
If crime can bleed, we can kill it.
Okay, we're ending here before it gets any crazier. Thank you all so much for coming on. Lucas, thank you for guesting this week and
Yes, thank
talking
you for being here.
all your
Thank you for
RPG
having me.
bullshit.
Thank you.
Where can
It's
the
only getting more powerful in 2024
where
somehow.
can the folks at home find you and your work these days?
Yeah, look me up on socials at Hokuto no Lucas. Most of my writing right now is at shacknews.com. You can read Eiyuden Chronicle review there. You'll be able to read. I've got stuff on the Final Fantasy 16 DLC coming up. New Saga game that's coming up real soon. All kinds of. They haven't really told me no yet, so I'm just going to keep taking advantage of that.
Heck yeah.
Shacknews.com.
Yeah, follow Lucas there. You can follow Nani and I at our respective social medias of choice. You can also follow us over at Axe the Blood God, our Patreon, our Discord. Please come hang out in our Discord if you dislike social media. Lord knows, so many of us do. The Discord has always been a very fun place to chat about just all RPG happenings with people who want to talk about RPGs and be chill about it. So come hang out there and chat. Until next time, for Lucas, for Nadia, for myself, see you on Axe of the Blood God.
Turtle Power.